Hi, I'm Jessie. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Connections Pastor here at Gold Creek, and one of my favorite things that I get to do in my role is get to know new families and help them get situated. So if it's your first time, or if you haven't let us know that you've been here before, would you text Gold Creek to that number on your screen? That'll allow us to reach out and send you a little bit more information. Also, we want to thank you to those that have given of their time and their resources. We can't do this without you. So if you're somebody who's been thinking about it and you'd like to begin giving of your resources today, would you text GC Mill Creek to that number on the screen? Again, thanks for joining us.
Resurrection song. This is my hallelujah come. This is why it's to you I run. This is my resurrection song. This is my hallelujah come. This is why it's to you I run. Holding on to you.
Jonah, why did you try to run away? Did you think you could hide? How come you took off in the opposite direction? Why didn't you want to get up and go? Don't you know that you can't escape me, even in the depths of the sea? What took you so long to pray? Did you forget that I'm the only one who can save you? Don't you believe I'm the God of second chances? Jonah, is it right for you to be angry? Shouldn't I feel sorry for such a great city?
Hey, welcome. I'm so glad you joined us. We start this brand new series called Big Fish. I can't wait. This is going to be great every week. In fact, we want you to participate in this series. There's a cool way for that to happen. Before I tell you how, let me just encourage you, if you're a regular attender at Gold Creek and this is your service, man, we are so glad you're there. Invite someone to watch it with you. Share the feed with somebody. Share the message with somebody. That's perfect. We're glad you're here. You're a part of us. We want to stay connected to you. Make sure you let us know what's going on in your life. If you're a newcomer, man, welcome aboard. It's really easy to join us, and we're going to help you get connected. And if you're just investigating us, this is the perfect way to do it. Thanks for coming. Hope you enjoy the message today. Well, I want to tell you how you can participate in Big Fish series. We encourage everybody to go fishing, especially take a kid fishing or take your spouse fishing or somebody fishing, and then take a picture of a fish and post it. All you have to do is tag it to @Gold Creek Church. And if you'll do that, you'll be entered into a contest at 10:30 this Sunday morning, 10:30. We're going to draw out of the hat those that have posted a name and give away a rod. You might win. We'll send it to you if you're far away, but we'll get that rod to you. So you want to participate in that. We're going to have a lot of fun through this series. We might even have, I've got a bunch of salmon. I'm thinking about cooking some salmon one time at the drive-in service. So it's going to be a great time. Thanks again for joining us in this series. The title of the message today it's called, What Are You Running From? What are you running from? Now just think about that question. What makes you run? Now, I'm not talking about running to get in shape and all that, but usually what I'm talking about is running out of fear. I went fly fishing in Alaska one time there was four other guys with me, and we'd been out in the wilderness for a while, and I wanted to go fly fishing to this little creek, and so I took my fly rod. They took their rifles because there were a lot of bears around. And I remember we were walking along, and as we got close to the creek, there was a bear on the hillside. And we noticed the bear on the hillside, and the first thing that we noticed, it was running right at us. And it was running right at us. I had my fly rod, and I remember turning to the guys saying, let's get together, let's look as big as we can, let's just stand our ground, because that's what you do with bears. You don't run and let them chase you down. So I stood there as big as I could, and I looked around to see my friends who were going to stand there, and they had the rifles, I had the fly rod, and of course, they were on the run. So what did I do? I ran too. And the story I'm about to tell you is the story of Jonah, who is a guy that was running, and he was running out of fear. You know, see, let me just introduce Jonah a little bit. Jonah is what we call a minor prophet. A minor prophet is like one of those guys that's doesn't make the big league. He doesn't get a lot of time in the Bible. He's just a small piece. And in his day, there were 3 prophets that were operating at his time. And 2 of them were more major than he was. He was just a third guy. It was a guy when God would speak to him when he needed a different voice. And this guy was incredibly popular, and I'll tell you why. He had predicted prosperity for his country. And everything he said came true. So when he walked down the streets, wherever he was, they loved this guy named Jonah because he had predicted prosperity. But he has a problem. Jonah himself has a huge problem. He hates Gentiles. He's actually a racist. And God is about to ask him to do something he doesn't want to do. Now, he's been asked to go and reach the city of Nineveh, which is full of Gentiles. And the city of Nineveh would have been really ripe for a message from God because there had been 2 plagues and then a solar eclipse, and they were waiting to hear something. They knew something was up, and they were waiting to hear from God. If Jonah would have just immediately gone and talked to them, they would have received the message from God. But the story of Jonah is a story that he wrote about himself and about his running from God. Let's dig in. We're going to do chapter 1 today, chapter 2 next week, chapter 3, and then chapter 4. You'll see each week we do a chapter. You can read ahead. You can see what it's like. It's a really fun story. So here it is, Jonah chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. The Lord gave this message to Jonah, son of Amittai. Get up and go to the great city of Nineveh. Announce my judgment against it because I've seen how wicked its people are. Now, I always think this is funny. Jonah's writing his own story. He's telling it on himself, but he's writing it in third person. And as we think about this, we think, why in the world did God choose Jonah? Why is it that Jonah was the one chosen? Well, as I conclude, as I look at all this, I think God is always sending messages. I think Jonah is just a minor prophet, and the reason he chose Jonah is because it kind of reminds us of ourselves. We're not that big. We're not that important. He's just a minor guy. He's just nobody. And God uses nobody to do some pretty incredible things. And the way he does that is by sending the messages. In other words, I think what he's saying to Jonah, I know you're a minor prophet. I know you're really nobody, but I have a purpose for you. I have a job for you. I have a plan for you. Follow me. We've got something important to do. And I think he says that to us too. Well, the story goes on. Jonah got up, went in the opposite direction to get away from the Lord. I underlined that because I just thought, you wonder why he's doing this? He's trying to get away from God. He went down to the port of Joppa, where he found a ship leaving for Tarshish. Now, I think this is kind of interesting because we're doing this on a boat here today. We're at the Everett Marina, and I just wanted to illustrate it. It would have been what he did. Joppa was a marina. You could go to a marina, find a boat, and they would buy a ticket and take them somewhere. And they would go out into the Mediterranean. And Tarshish is about as far away as you can get from the city of Nineveh. Nineveh was inland. It'd be like going to Spokane. Instead of going to Spokane, you're going to Everett. It's the opposite direction. And the ship was leaving for Tarshish. I think Jonah in his mind was thinking, God's going to have to use someone else. Because if I'm in Tarshish, I can't be the prophet God chooses to use for Nineveh. So he bought a ticket. He went on board, hoping to escape from the Lord by sailing to Tarshish. Now, he bought a one-way ticket. A lot of times we do the same thing. We think we're headed one way and we're going to be this way. Little did he know, Jonah didn't know how painful his return trip would be. Let me give you some advice right now. If you're running from God, God's given you a message, God's doing something in your life, don't buy a one-way ticket in the wrong direction. Stop now. If you're headed in the wrong direction, stop now, turn around. It will be worth it because the trip back is really painful. Which makes me ask the question, what are you running from? What are we running from? I was thinking all the different things that we run from. Sometimes God gives us a message. We're just minor prophets. We have a message from God and he says, speak up, share your faith. And we run from our neighbors, our coworkers, our family members because we're afraid of rejection. And we're afraid to speak up. Sometimes the message that God gives us is step up. I want you to be a better husband. I want you to be a better wife. I want you to be a better friend. I want you to be a better worker. Step up. I have a reason that I have you there. You're in that relationship for a reason. Come on, step up. Sometimes he says, parent up. The kid that I gave you, no one else could handle. You're the only one. You're the perfect person for them. Step up. Parenting's hard. Do the right thing. Don't stop. Don't quit. Don't give up. Don't be their friend. Be their parent. Sometimes he says, cheer up. Whatever you're worrying about, whatever's got you down right now, you don't have to be worrying about it. Quit worrying about it. Cheer up. Sometimes he says, pony up. The job that I've given you, the money that I've given you, the resources that I've given you make a difference in someone else's life. I want to use you in an incredible way. Learn to be generous. And in all of those things, we can all hear that message from God and then turn around and run from God. Sometimes we all run from God. We have a mission, though. God has a word for every one of us, even though we're all just minor prophets. Well, the story goes on. Verse 6. All this time, Jonah was sound asleep in the hold. It says, the Lord hurled a powerful wind over the sea, causing a violent storm that threatened to break the ship apart. Fearing for their lives, the desperate sailors shouted to their God and threw the cargo overboard to lighten the ship. In other words, this is a storm like none other. These are sailors. They knew what they were doing. This was a worse storm they've ever experienced. And it's pretty amazing. They're doing everything they can to survive. While they're doing this, all this time, Jonah was sound asleep in the hold. So the captain went down after him. How can you sleep at a time like this? I was thinking about that. Why do you think Jonah was asleep in the hold? You know what? He was hiding from God. He was hiding from God. Now, maybe you're listening today and you've been running from God for a long time. I know of a young woman who's been running from God for a long time. I've been in relationship with her for a long time, and I remember her as a teenager. She began to run from God and she ran to drugs. She tried to fill her life with drugs and alcohol and all of that, and that ended in some pretty terrible experiences. And then she began to fill her life with men. She had 3 different marriages, 4 different men, 4 different kids by 4 different marriages, all of them ending in failure. It's all a process of trying to run from God. Even now, she finds herself depressed, on medication, doing everything she can, and still she runs from God. She's headed in the wrong direction if she would just turn around. Here we find Jonah, depressed, asleep in the bottom of the ship, hiding from God. Maybe that's you, maybe that's us. Well, the story goes on. It says, get up and pray to your God. Maybe he will pay attention to us and spare our lives. Then the crew cast lots to see which one of them had offended their gods and caused the terrible storm. Now I think what did Jonah think was going to happen here? What did he believe God was going to do? I just wonder, what did he really think? Well, the next verse tells us what happened. When they did this, the lots identified Jonah as the culprit. Was that a lucky guess? Or was that God? Jonah knew. He knew it was his fault. Can I say that the beginning of change, when you really want to stop running from God, the beginning of change happens when you just begin to own your stuff. Have you ever had trouble losing keys? My wife and I have always had trouble losing keys. Sometimes we have trouble losing our checkbook. And it's so frustrating when you come in and you know you had the keys, you put them right here. And so the first thing you do is you blame the kids, you blame the dogs, you blame anybody you possibly can, because you don't want to be responsible for the fact that you probably lost the keys. It's probably right where you put them the last place. And the beginning of change is when you finally just say, it's my fault. I got to figure this out. I can't worry about who I think it's their fault. I just need to own my stuff. I want you to hear this now. Every marriage gets better when each person owns their stuff. Now, if you're in a marriage relationship, why don't you just turn to them right now and just say this: it's my fault. My fault. That's all you have to do. I was wrong. Try that. Practice that. I was wrong. My wife and I laugh, and we do that every once in a while. And when she says she's wrong, I have her stop and repeat it, because it doesn't happen very often. And I'm thinking today, in our lives too, all of us, we don't like to own our stuff, but the beginning of change, when you stop running from God, is the moment that you own your stuff. There's a confession, no excuses, no pointing fingers. And it's the beginning of change. But for Jonah, no change yet. Maybe next week we'll find that there's a change, but today he's still running from God. In fact, the story goes on. Why has this awful storm come down on us? They demanded. Who are you? They asked. What is your line of work? What country are you from? What is your nationality? These are all really great questions. And I was thinking, he immediately is a Hebrew. He believes in the God. And in fact, that's the next thing that he said. Jonah answered, I'm a Hebrew. I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. He knew who he was. I asked that same question. Are we really Christians? Interesting Barna poll recently shows that a fourth of Christians have just quit practicing their faith through this coronavirus time. And I asked myself the question, are they really a Christian? Are they really following God? Well, Jonah goes on. The sailors were terrified. When they heard this, for he had already told them that he was running away from the Lord. Why did you do it? They groaned. Why did you do it? This is really, really good question. Why did you do it? So you answer the question. Why did you run from God? Why do you run from God? I think of a lot of reasons, just like running from the bear. We're just afraid. What are we afraid of? Oh, I talk to people all the time. They're afraid they're not going to have any fun as a Christian. They're afraid it's going to be too hard for them, too big. They're going to be too religious, too rejected by their friends, you just fill in the blank. There's so many people that are running from God because of fear. I had a good friend who I shared my faith with, and over a period of time, I convinced him about God, and I talked to him about how Jesus was real and how he was meaningful to me. And at the end of the day, I remember asking him this question, do you really believe in Jesus? And he said, yeah, I really believe in Jesus. And do you believe he's really the only way to God? Yeah, I really believe that. Well, why don't you commit your life to him? And he said, no, I'm not ready yet. I want to do a lot of things before I do that. And he turned around and he ran away from God. His life ended in a really terrible spot. And he eventually turned to God. But if he would have stopped right there and just said, man, I need to just turn toward God, how much better his life would have been. But in his mind, he had more to do. Why do you do it? Why do you run? Well, Jonah goes on and says this, verse 11. Since the storm was getting worse all the time, they asked him, what should we do to stop the storm? And here's an interesting answer. Throw me into the sea. Throw me into the sea, Jonah said, and it will become calm again. Now, I was thinking of a lot of different answers he could have had. If he was really done running from God, all he had to do is say, turn the boat around, take me back, and I'll go to Nineveh. The storm would have been done. Instead, he was so committed to run from God that he was willing to die rather than convert those Ninevites, those Gentiles that he hated. In fact, I think he was saying, there's no way that God is going to make me do that, which I think is always laughable. Whenever we say we're not going to do that, I think God has a wonderful way of helping us do whatever it is we think we're not going to do. Well, the story goes on. I know that this terrible storm is all my fault. Instead, the sailors rowed even harder to get the ship to the land. But the stormy sea was too violent for them, and they couldn't make it. These Gentiles, amazingly, were willing, even though they knew Jonah was at fault here, even though they knew they needed to throw him over, they were willing to do everything they could to save his life. Now think about that. Jonah hated Gentiles. They loved him more than he loved them. They were willing to sacrifice their life for him, but he was unwilling to do that for them. They cried out to the Lord. Now this is a great verse, verse 14. To the Lord, Jonah's God. O Lord, they pleaded, don't make us die for this man's sin, and don't hold us responsible for his death. What a prayer. Number one, they acknowledged God. Number two, they admitted their sins. They admitted Jonah's sins and their own sins. And then they confessed a sin they were about to do, which was to throw Jonah overboard. And they said, don't hold us responsible. And he says, oh Lord, you have sent this storm on him for your own good reasons. Then they picked up Jonah and they threw him into the raging sea, and the storm stopped at once. What a great picture. In fact, it's a great picture for us today. What is it that needs to go overboard in your life to calm your storm? Think about that. Where is your rebellion? What one-way ticket have you bought to keep you from doing what God's called you to do? I just am reminded, recently a friend came by and we were at dinner and we were with another couple and this friend came by and said, tell this couple how you saved my son's life. And I was thinking, oh man. Well, first of all, she was being very, very kind. Her son was a heroin addict, and when they came to church, he gave his life to God and he quit running from God and he started to run to God, and his life completely changed. And I never changed his life, but God changed his life, and it was such a great story. It was a great story because he quit running. And that's the same story that all of us will have today if we'll simply quit running. Well, here's the end of the story. Verse 16, last verse of the chapter. The sailors were awestruck by the Lord's great power. They offered him a sacrifice and vowed to serve him. I just think this is hilarious to me. Jonah was committed to not share the good news with the Ninevites or any Gentile. And yet God used his own rebellion to convert a bunch of Gentiles on a boat. Poor Jonah, no matter what he did, God was going to use him. And I want to say this to you. God uses even your rebellion. You're here today for whatever reason you've been running from God, for whatever reason you've not been following the message that God's given you. It's time. It's time. Would you just pray with me? Ask yourself this question. What are you running from? What are you running from? What rebellion in your life needs to go overboard? Has he asked you to speak up, to step up, to parent up, to cheer up, to pony up? I want you to hear God's voice today and be willing to change your direction. It's time for action. Jonah knew what had to happen. He had to go overboard. And I think we all know what has to happen. We have to be willing to go overboard. We have to let go of our rebellion to calm the storm in our life. We have to be willing to change. You know, next Sunday, we're going to be baptizing people. And they're going to go all in. And we do it at the farm. We dump huge buckets of water on people so that everybody knows that they're all in. And it's so cool because we had to make room for somebody that wasn't able to be baptized last time, and they needed to be baptized. And so we're going to have it this next Sunday. And I was thinking about that today. For some of you today, you could commit yourself to be willing to be baptized. Wherever you are, you can text the word right now. There's a number on the screen that says, I'm in, I'm just baptized. That's a great way. Just the word baptized. And we'll contact you and tell you how you can be a part of that. But this day is a decision you make in your own heart. Whatever rebellion in your life, whatever thing you're running from God is, today it needs to go overboard. And you're going to watch me go overboard. And my willingness to go overboard, are you willing to go overboard?
Thanks for joining us today. To keep up to date on what's going on here at Gold Creek, make sure you're following us on social media. Also, download our Gold Creek app or check out what's going on our website at goldcreek.org. We'll see you next time.